Hi, I'm Mimi Lichtenstein, and today I am here with Marty Bear from Abercrombie and Kent. Thank you for joining us, Marty. I am super excited to have you here because you are my go-to resource for everything Alaska. And as you know, I just planned my own personal trip there for this summer. So I've been doing lots of great research and finding out about all the cool, fun things to do. So I'm super excited to have you on. You have a very interesting, unique background. So I'd love for you to give our guests, our viewers, a little bit of insight into who you are and how you got to be where you are today.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you for having me with you, Mimi. And just to give you a little bit of background, I've been in touch with Alaska and traveling to Alaska from my homes in California and Washington State for the last 40 plus years. Initially, I was a management consultant and was doing consulting work for the state of Alaska after they received their oil money for the North Slope oil. And I started to travel when I was going up there as a consultant. And finally, in 1978, first of all, I lived up there. I took a leave of absence from consulting and lived there from 72 to 74, working for the state of Alaska. And then in 1978, I did something that was life-changing with my family and children who were 7 and 9 at the time. We recreated the Klondike Gold Rush in its entirety, which meant taking a ferry from Seattle to Skagway, Alaska, and then hiking the Chilkoot Trail. And my daughter at the time, who was 6, turned 7 on the trail and was the youngest person at the time, at least, in recorded National Park Service recorded history to hike the Klondike Trail into the Yukon. And then, what's that?
How long is that? It
was 45 miles, but it's on the Alaska side. It's very inclement weather. Coming up off the Inside Passage. And then on the Canadian side over the mountains, it tends to be a little bit nicer weather. After we did the hike, we actually canoed 450 miles to the Klondike Gold Rush on the Headwater Lakes and the Yukon River. And then we panned for gold up in Dawson City in the Klondike. Anyway, that was a month-long trip that was life-changing. I did it with friends and my family, and at the end of it, I said, I have to figure out a way to make my career in adventure travel in Alaska. And 2 years later, I left consulting and started my first, that would have been a series of travel businesses, culminating in working for Abercrombie and Kent as of about 2 years ago to start the Abercrombie and Kent USA Destination Management Company, which we have now set up in Boulder, Colorado. We have 10 staff, and we're doing travel all over the USA, but with a focus on the Western US, California, and Alaska. And today I'm happy to be joining you to talk about Alaska. I'm sometimes called Mr. Alaska by people in the travel industry, and I have been actually doing travel work in Alaska, since 1980. So it's a long time. I've traveled all over the state and places that we send travelers to, and some that are just too remote and ridiculous that we don't, because there's no accommodations and you're, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I do know something about the whole state, even the areas that people do go for travel and others as well.
And I always like to throw in there too that you are a former rocket scientist, a Stanford MBA. So we're, in the presence of someone who's a very smart guy, in addition to a very experienced guy in Alaska. And on top of that, you also have a background in and knowledge of cruises and expedition cruises in Alaska. So you know it from the water side and the land side and everywhere.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in big ship cruises. I know a little about them, but I do know a lot about the small ship expedition cruises and yachts in Alaska, plus a variety of land options.
Okay, perfect. So that's what we're going to dive into today. And the one thing you told me the other day, which I thought was very interesting, and I'm so grateful I'm not there today, and that is that once you were in Fairbanks when it was minus 62 degrees.
Yes, you have a good memory. At the time, and this was in the 1990s, at the time it was the coldest temperature in recorded history in Fairbanks. I have a picture somewhere, although I'm not sure I can find it, of the bank temperature sign outside the bank, one of those rotating signs on a post, and it said minus 62. And that was the coldest day. There was no wind, so the wind chill was also minus 62. So we didn't have to make it even more miserable. But I was doing outdoor research for summer, for converting one of the old gold mines into a tourist attraction for the summer. So we had to actually be outside quite a bit, but you did it in short spurts of about 15 minutes each. And we have a saying in Alaska that there's no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad gear. And so even at minus 62, which is, by the way, the kind of temperatures and wind chills that the North Slope oil workers work in all the time, you just have to have the right everything. And so I had boots that were the same ones that the people at the North Slope oil workers work in, which have an air pump. You actually pump up your boots to have an air insulator, and then a felt liner inside of that, and about 3 pairs of socks. My feet were not cold. And then you have, of course, long underwear and special thermal pants and, big parka and 2 or 3 layers of sweaters, etc.
Well, I'm grateful we're talking about summer travel. And so hopefully none of us are going to have to equip ourselves with such gear prior to coming. I thought we could start, we'll touch on a few things like the overview of Alaska, the different areas people can go, some of our favorite hotels, some of our favorite experiences, all the cool wildlife we can see. And so I'm going to say, let's start with the overview of Alaska. You want to just give us an idea about the different parts of it and what's there?
Sure, absolutely. So let me start by saying that I think the perfect vacation to Alaska is one that combines the coast and the interior. So the coastal areas that in Southeast Alaska, they're in orange, and in South Central Alaska in yellow, are the ones that the big cruise ships go to. They're also the ones where the expedition ships generally go to, and also the ones where our company, Abercrombie & Kent, has yachts for those who want to have a completely private experience. You want to go to the coast because that's where the coastal glaciers are that are calving the big icebergs that are into the water. There's lots of action as the glaciers are calving. It's also the place where you can see the marine wildlife. And the marine wildlife includes everything, from a variety of seabirds, the puffins and cormorants and mures that people have seen pictures of, but also the marine mammals. And the marine mammals include the, seals, sea lions. You're going ahead, Mimi. Anyway, the seals, the sea lions, and whales, and a variety of different whale species. The humpback whales are the most common in both the South Central area on the coast and the Southeast as well. But there are other species of whales there as well, the gray whales, the minke whales, and others. Sea lions and seals are very, very abundant. And so you want to see the marine mammals and other marine wildlife and the coastal glaciers on the coast. And then you want to go into the interior. The area that's called the interior is fine, but South Central, the northern part of South Central Alaska, away from the water, is also, what I would call part of the interior. And there you're going to see the great mountain ranges, which are especially the Alaska Range, which is up there just south of Fairbanks near Denali National Park, which is just south of Fairbanks. And also the terrestrial wildlife, especially what we call the charismatic megafauna. And charismatic megafauna includes the caribou, the moose, the brown bears, black bears, and that's an important part of a trip too. So we try to do a trip that's a combination of the coast and the interior.
And I think that sounds perfect. That's exactly what we're going to do, the interior and the coast. And I think that to me is sort of the sales point for if you are going to go on a boat, an expedition boat, do an extension before or after where you can go a little further into the interior so you get the experience of both, I think. And let's see, I know I have some pictures of, actually here. So Why We Love Alaska. I made this. There's so many activities. The wildlife, the activities, the adventures, it sort of seems like the perfect playground for someone like me, at least. And I think, you can even go see like the sled dog puppies, right? There's like a sled dog.
Yes, there's several places, several of the champion sled dog racers. The big race that we have is the Iditarod dog sled race, which is the first weekend of March, or second, I think it's the second weekend of March. This year, by the way, it's been curtailed significantly because of COVID. So they're not having the ceremonial start and all the parties, the mushers ball, everything else that they usually have in Anchorage at the start. And that goes from Anchorage to Nome. So it's about 1,000-mile race. But several of the mushers who have won the race in the past have kennels during the summertime where you can go and see the dogs, see the new puppies that have been born. Also, even go on a dog sled. I mean, obviously, there's no snow on the ground at that time, so you're doing sleds on wheels generally if you're doing a summer dog sled experience. Now, there is an exception, and that is you can do a helicopter dog sled trip up onto one of the glaciers, and there's several places around Alaska, both in the southeast Alaska and in south central Alaska. There's several places that have helicopter dog sledding where they actually keep the teams of dogs and the musher guides up on the ice fields, and you helicopter up and actually can go on a trip, on a dog sled experience on snow as opposed to on wheels.
Is Winter Lake have that?
Yes, Winter Lake has that. So Winter Lake Lodge is one of my favorites, just south of Denali, and Winter Lake Lodge has helicopter access, and they'll take one of the helicopter tours they have is to take you up onto one of the ice fields near the lodge for helicopter dog sledding. It's a fantastic thing. Now, there aren't too many lodges that have helicopter accessibility, but Winter Lake is one of them. And so that gives you not just the helicopter dog sledding, it gives you a lot of options while you're there. For example, helicopter fishing. Now, that sounds kind of funny. You're not fishing from the helicopter, but you're going by helicopter to virgin streams that literally cannot be accessed any other way but by helicopter. Meaning that maybe a couple miles upstream, there's a waterfall, and a couple of miles downstream, there's another waterfall, meaning that you cannot float from anywhere that stream can be accessed to where you're going to be fishing. And so it's a spectacular fishing experience. The biggest problem about Alaska fishing is once people go fishing in Alaska, whether it's stream fishing or deep sea fishing along the coast, they are always disappointed by the next place they go fishing because, we get so spoiled with a strike almost every cast that it's just like, I fish in California where I live. And, it's slow by comparison. You have to get into the zen of fishing here in California. Up in Alaska, it's a lot more action because it is so pristine.
I think my son said it's not called catching, or we said that to him too, because fishing is all about waiting for
exactly. Yeah, we differentiate between fishing and catching fish in Alaska. Okay. And in general, in Alaska, we're catching fish.
I will say also, by the way, I went scuba diving for the very first time in my life on the Great Barrier Reef. And that was also not a good idea because it's hard to go, top that time after time. So let's hope those fishermen have gotten their fishing in. And I have just a few pictures here, and we're going to touch on some more when we get to the lodges. But obviously, this is a picture of the Northern Lights. And maybe give us a little insight. At what point of the year can you see the Northern Lights?
So it has to be dark to see the Northern Lights. And it really isn't dark until mid-September. And the dark lasts enough to be able to see the Northern Lights through about mid to late March. So that's the time period. I think, again, you could look it up online, but I've found my own experiences that the best Northern Lights viewing is between January and March. And that's also a time when the weather is improving and the light is increasing. I mean, because typically you are going up there to do Northern Lights, but you want to have enough daylight so you can also do other activities during the day. So if you go up in in November, December, or even early January, you only have maybe 4, depending on where you go. But if you go up fairly far north, and going further north is better for Northern Lights. I've seen the Northern Lights even in Southeast Alaska. But the best place to see it is up in the interior and in the northern part of Alaska. And that area, in November, December, and early January only has maybe 3 or 4 hours of daylight. I mean, if you're above the Arctic Circle, there's no daylight. So best to go in late January, February, March, and then you can go to places like Winter Lake Lodge or to other lodges in that area near the Alaska Range, or up in Fairbanks, and there's lots of wonderful choices for Northern Lights viewing. So it's not guaranteed, but it's typically people will take at least 3 days and 3 nights at a lodge that specializes in Northern Lights viewing. You're almost certain to see it on one of those 3 days. And then you have different activities to do during the day. During the day, you can go dog sledding, you can go cross-country skiing, you can go snowshoeing. There's a variety of activities that are possible. And there's some wildlife viewing too. I mean, the bears are hibernating, so you're not going to see bears, but the moose, the caribou, other charismatic megafauna are around.
They're out there. Well, these next photos are all from Winter Lake. Obviously, this one is from probably January, February, March timeframe. It looks stunning. I know it's on a lot of people's bucket lists. I personally would love to go see it. So I guess I'm going to have to go back at another time of year, since I'll be there the first week of August.
Right.
But you just look at this, and this is probably, this also looks like the winter, just based on I mean, look at those stars, right? It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, well, these are dark sky areas. These are areas where it's one of the advantages of going to a backcountry lodge. So, for example, I say to mix the coast with the interior, but most people who travel the interior of Alaska do it on the road system, and there's not that many roads in Alaska. Basically, I mean, there's one road down from Anchorage down to the Kenai Peninsula, and then another road north. There's a couple of smaller roads to the east, but something like maybe 75% of Alaska is roadless. So the beauty of going to a backcountry lodge is that you get to go to an area that is really natural, is really wild, including wild animals like this brown bear here, for example, and is a dark sky. So in terms of both stargazing and Northern Lights, it's the best place to go. It's a little more expensive than a road trip. Most of the cruise lines, the big ship cruise lines, when they offer pre and post extensions, are doing them on the road system. And that means the road system is relatively crowded. But we do a lot of pre and post private extensions, even not just from expedition ships, but also from bigger ships, where instead of going on a bus, you go with just your own private guide and your own private vehicle. And that's a good experience too, because it's not, the budget for backcountry lodges is much more expensive than a road system trip. Yeah. And so we want to offer both options.
I think, is this the dog sledding glacier? I think.
This is the ice field. This is called the ice field. The glaciers are what sort of come down out of the ice field, and they're like, you got to think of them like streams of ice. Instead of streams of water, think of a glacier as a stream of ice. But up above the stream of ice, the glaciers themselves, is an ice field. This is like a lake of ice. So, and this is the one that they've set up for the dog sledding. And so you access that by helicopter. So Winter Lake has a fantastic, a set of activities available. So I mentioned the stream, the helicopter fishing, helicopter dog sledding. There's also helicopter hiking, which is just spectacular because you get on a helicopter float trip. There's another good one. So again, they bring the rafts out to virgin streams. You won't see anybody else on those trips,
except maybe a moose.
Yes, look at that. No other people. But I love the helicopter hiking because, for example, you can helicopter from Winter Lake up 2,000 feet to a ridge behind the lodge. And from that ridge, you have unobstructed views of Mount Denali. And you've kind of saved yourself 2,000 feet of hiking up. You can also hike up if you want the exercise, but then you're up there and you're hiking the ridge lines. There's still some up and down. There's still some good exercise, but you've avoided the 2,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. And now you're up where you have open vistas everywhere you're hiking. So it's extraordinary.
I think that there's so many appealing things for me about Alaska. One of them is that massive, expansive open vista, which we're going to see more pictures of those in a minute. But the other one, as you could tell from the pictures I picked to talk about today, are the bears. Like, I mean, look at that. How fun would that be to see these cute? They look so very cute, exactly, although I know that they're not really. But there's
they are definitely. Let's go back to the bears. Let me talk about that a little bit before we go on to fishing. Yeah. So there are bears all over Alaska, and there are black bears, brown bears, and polar bears. The polar bears in Alaska are very difficult to see. We have some access to places you can see polar bears, but honestly, the accommodations are spartan. They're mostly mobile, mobile homes and RVs that have been outfitted for guests, but they're pretty spartan. But we do send some people to see polar bears, but you can see brown bears and stay in much nicer accommodations all through the summer. And the brown bears are there's two different types of brown bears. We call them brown bears, and then the ones you showed just before, I see the slide just above it with the two bears there. Those are called grizzlies. The other ones are called brown bears. It's the same bear, but they are of different colors. And the reason that they're of different colors, even though it's the exact same species, is what they eat. So the brown ones are the ones that are along the coast and eat mostly salmon, spawning salmon, when the salmon are spawning on different runs from June to September. The lighter brown ones, and they're sometimes even blonde, are the ones you'll see in the interior because they're predominantly feeding on caribou and other terrestrial animals. They catch a moose calf from time to time. So it is the same species. So I'd say the most dependable places to see bears are during the salmon spawning runs at the salmon spawning streams, because the bears are attracted there. To see the terrestrial bears, like at Denali, for example, and other places in the interior, is more difficult because there's no one place that the bears go to catch a caribou or to kill a caribou or a moose. They're just ranging all over tremendous areas to try to find one and to kill it. So it's much more. If you go to Denali and we put you on a wildlife tour, you're very likely to see a bear. It may be at a great distance, but if you go along the coast to some of the salmon spawning areas, you're much higher probability of seeing bears.
I mean, it's like Africa, right? Where you have water source or where you have a food source, you're going to find a group of animals hanging out.
Exactly. So we have our favorite spots. There's one island Inside Passage. We do yacht cruises and expedition cruises in the Inside Passage. And there are several good streams in the Inside Passage where you're likely to see bears. There's the Katmai National Park, which is southwest of Anchorage, that has some of the densest brown bear anywhere. One place is called Brooks Falls. In fact, if you go online for the Brooks Falls webcam in the summertime, you can actually see live webcam of the bears there at Brooks Falls.
Awesome.
We try that one is probably the most one or two most popular places for bears. And in the peak season of bear viewing, which is from mid-June to mid-July, when there's some spectacular salmon runs, it tends to be very crowded there. And they have observation platforms, but sometimes there's an hour wait till you can get out of the platform. It's a bit crowded. So we have other places in Katmai National Park that we can take you to that are away from Brooks Falls and still have lots and lots of bears in that peak season. But Brooks is a good place to go for bear viewing in the shoulder season. So let's say late July and August, or even into early September, or earlier in June. It's much better to go to Brooks then, because you'll still see, 6 to 10 bears, maybe not 20 at a time, but it's still phenomenal bear viewing without the crowds that you get in the peak of the peak season.
Have you ever seen, I think it's Thomas Mangelson. He's an amazing photographer. He has beautiful places. Yeah, I think, 25 years ago when I lived in Southern California, I'm pretty sure he has a gallery in Laguna Beach, and I saw his picture of the bear eating the salmon as it was jumping out of the water.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I want to see.
That was taken at Brooks Falls. That Mangelsson photo is taken at Brooks Falls. But honestly, I was just there last August, and August of 2019. We didn't travel in 2020. In August of 2019, I was there with one of my daughters, Rose, who Mimi, and we were there in mid-August. We saw a dozen bears over the course of a day. And without any, there were other people, but there was no crowds. There was no waiting to get to the observation platform or anything like that. And we saw several bears standing right on that same edge of Brooks Falls, waiting for salmon to jump into their mouths. Now, we never got a picture like Mangelson's picture of the bear just before of the bear just before it bit down on a fish. But we had plenty of pictures of the bear catching fish as it jumped over the falls with their feet and then grabbing the fish out of the water. So it's a spectacular experience. We try to include it on everybody's trip to Alaska. It's one of those rare experiences, and we have several locations where there's good bear viewing, and we know when peak seasons are. We know when the salmon are spawning in certain places, and so we know where it's too crowded, and so we gauge that to help you go to a place that isn't crowded but still has. I never say guaranteed bears, but virtually guaranteed bears.
Okay, well, it's definitely on the list for me when I get there. And I know these are more pictures from Tutka Bay. So Tutka Bay is also one of the places I want to go. And I think that for me, the beauty of being on the coast in Tutka Bay and being able to go fishing and being able to go see the bears, they have kayaking. They have actually down here, I have even yoga in here for those people out there who like to get their yoga in. I assume these are salmon. They look salmon colored.
No, those are red snapper. So those are red snapper, huge ones in Alaska. I mean, they're gigantic. And the ones you saw before one was a salmon. The silver one was a salmon, and on the left, and the one on the right is a halibut. So the deep sea fishing off of Tutka Bay Lodge, which is, by the way, down on the Kenai Peninsula, south of Anchorage, the deep sea fishing is fabulous. Again, it will spoil you for fishing almost anywhere else. And they can arrange for the fish to be, cleaned, flash frozen, and shipped back to you once you're back home.
Well, I will actually been fortunate enough to experience that. I didn't bring it myself. However, I had a friend of a friend who was flying back from Alaska, and he brought back a tuna that he had caught like the day before. And so we all had sushi when he arrived at the house, which was so fun.
Nice.
I think, for lots of us who don't get there, regularly, it's definitely a special treat. Okay, I wanted to show, this is like my thing of the day. Let's see if I can get it to go to the video. All right, so I love everything about that. That's obviously the Via Ferrata that you take the helicopter to from Tordrillo Lodge, and it is on my bucket list to do. Marty, have you ever done this?
I have done Via Ferratas at other places. I have not done the Via Ferrata at Tordrillo. I'm not a climber, but the Via Ferratas that I have done are so well set up and safety-wise and everything else that even though it may make your knees weak to look at it, it actually is an experience that anyone in reasonably good shape can enjoy.
Yeah, which for me, it's nice to know, right? You don't have to be like the climber who's climbing up the 2,000 feet to actually get there. All you have to do is, be willing to go walk out on a very skinny, tight, I guess, what is it? Like, it's just a cable probably. Is that right?
Yeah, but you're, of course, you're in a harness that is fully protected. So you're not going to fall. If you slip, they'll retrieve you. But
okay.
You have the impression, and of course you can take photos that make it seem like you're, climbing Everest. I mean, or climbing frozen waterfalls. I have some shots of my kids when they were younger, taken from the side while they were climbing a glacier with 2 ice axes and crampons on their feet. That makes it look like have thousands of feet of exposure when they didn't.
Okay.
So you get some amazing photos. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, look at this, right? Like the vista of that, and you could probably see if you're closely enough the little tiny helicopter in the foreground, and then obviously the massive mountain ranges in the back. And here's, another example of the incredible topography that you have when you're up there.
Yeah.
And
so this is so there is a glacier.
Okay.
As I say, most of the activities take place on ice fields that are up above the glaciers, but then you are able in some places to hike onto the glaciers themselves and see this amazing jumble of ice and iceberg, large icebergs and such. It's just quite spectacular. And of course, the thing you'll also notice is that the glaciers have a lot of dirt and soil and rocks in them. That's all that black stuff. And people wonder what's that's all about. But basically, when the glaciers were being formed and they were grinding their way down, most of the glaciers in Alaska are receding now because of climate change, and global warming. But when during the last ice age, when the glaciers were actually coming down from the ice fields, they're picking up, as they're grinding their way through these valleys, they're picking up dirt and rocks and soil. And so that's what you see inside these glaciers.
Well, obviously, it's just stunning. So
it is stunning. Well, there's a saying we have in Alaska that I think is true, and especially if you can take a trip that gets you away from the crowds to the backcountry lodges, and that is, once you go to Alaska, you never come all the way back. and I think it's true. It really stays with you. I think that's true of parts of Africa too. I mean, I'm not saying it's the only place that has that impact on you, but because it is a wild and awesome place, like some other places in the world, like parts of Africa, it is something that just never leaves you. I went there as a management consultant, as I said, and while I was up there, I started doing some traveling, and it just got into my bones, and I just figured out a way to make my life's work Alaska. But it's that way for everybody, even if you have other life's work. It's the kind of place where people used to say, well, Alaska is a one-time destination. I'll just go. But the fact is that people who really are gripped by it, and many are, come back time and again to some of the same places, but sometimes to different places, because it has that sort of magical allure.
I think, Marty, one of the things we share in common is that we both are super lucky to be doing for our profession something that is super true to what we're passionate about and what we love to do. And I feel very lucky to have that be a part of my life. And I assume you do too. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, no.
Well, let me ask you this. So here, we've gone through, actually, one thing I wanted to touch on is luxury in Alaska. So people ask, is there luxury in Alaska? Similar people ask the same thing about Africa. And I think, you could see the pictures. This is a very nice, cabin and lodge in Alaska. It's not going to be, the luxury is in the experience in Alaska. And for me, that's so much about what luxury is anyway. If I'm in the middle of, camping somewhere and I have a hot cup of coffee that's delicious and strong, to me, that's luxury. But can you touch on, like, for people who, like to have really nice accommodations and amazing food, a lot of these lodges in Alaska have that, right? They have their own farms, they have organic produce. And what is it like? Yeah,
so we, specialize in lodges that we always say that we offer a luxury experience in Alaska. The actual accommodations that you're going to be in are more rustic, as this picture shows, rather than a Four Seasons type of luxury. But the experience you're going to have is definitely luxurious, often certainly including some of the best guided experiences you've ever had anywhere. But also they can be helicopter experiences. They can, and then the cuisine is, we again select the lodges that we work with because of their cuisine. So the Winter Lake Lodge, for example, and the Tutka Bay Lodge are owned by a friend of mine, Kirsten Dixon. And Kirsten is a cordon bleu chef. She literally studied under Julia Childs in southern France. And she's the one who creates the menus, hires all the staff, and does some of the cuisine herself, but has other chefs that follow her recipes. She has some fabulous, if you go online to Amazon, she has some fabulous books. Just look her up. You could just look up Winter Lake Lodge cookbooks or Tutka Bay Lodge cookbook or Kirsten Dixon, KirstenDixon. And, some of the recipes that are, or the recipes that she's created for the lodges are in there. So you can get very comfortable accommodations, fabulous experiences that I call luxury experiences, and cordon bleu cuisine at some of the lodges up there. So there is that, but the accommodations are rustic, but I think it's still a luxury experience, as Mimi was saying. The only other, sort of luxury accommodations that we have is we do have some private yachts that are in the coastal areas, one up in the Prince William Sound area just south of Anchorage, south central Alaska, and one in the Inside Passage that goes between Juneau and Sitka. And those are luxurious accommodations in addition to hot cuisine and fabulous experiences by motorized Zodiac, by kayak, and hiking on the shore, bear viewing, et cetera, and other marine mammals.
Of one of those, this one.
Yeah, so that's the Sea Mist in Prince William Sound. Again, the focus of the Sea Mist is, and the Kaori is the other yacht we have, Kaori. Those two yachts are very comfortable. This one is a 6-passenger yacht. The other one is a 9-passenger yacht, 4 staterooms, 9 passengers. This one is 3 staterooms and 6 passengers. But you have it to yourself privately. We have suggested itineraries, but you're flexible. If the captain hears about a special sighting of humpback whales, they can make a diversion to do that because you're not on a set itinerary and set schedule.
Yeah.
You go to the glacial fjord. So I think that the yachts and some of the small ships as well, some of the expedition ships are again, very comfortable in terms of lodging and a luxury experience. This
morning I was emailing with from Lindblad, and she said because they they sail under a U.S. flag, they're actually planning to sail in Alaska this summer, whereas I think most of the expedition ships perhaps that aren't under a U.S. flag aren't able to do that. So they are sailing and would do obviously a great pairing with a land-based trip by you guys and an inside passage trip.
Yeah. No, there's Uncruise Adventures and Lindblad. Both are going to be sailing this summer. Okay. Alaska, for both land and sea, has a 3-day COVID test required before you come up. But it's all, we did that in 2020 as well. I mean, even though there was so little travel in the rest of the world, we had a very good summer of travel in the USA, especially Alaska, because of the standardization of the COVID testing, and we had no problems with COVID on any of the several hundred people that traveled with us in 2020. We already have way more than that signed up in advance for 2021. So the USA and Alaska especially are really prime destinations for travel, even during the COVID pandemic.
Okay. I always like to touch on ultra luxe, over the top fabulousness. And when I think of Alaska and I think of those words, I think of Sheldon Chalet. If you can see the very, very tiny little, well, it looks tiny because it's in the middle of vastness, right? Here it is. I think it sleeps 10 people, 5 bedrooms. And at the moment, I was talking with Marty the other day, they're only doing private buyouts. They're open 12 months a year. It's an amazing story of an Alaskan adventurer who built this long ago, and I highly suggest you go check it out if you're interested. You could see, look at this picture from, probably a winter night, just spectacular beauty, remote, no Wi-Fi. So if you need to stay connected, this is not the place for you. And it's obviously a big ordeal to get there and to get food there and all the other things, which is why it has, a higher price tag. It's got also lots of helicopter experiences and cool places to go. So I said to my kids, we're not going there with you guys. Maybe I'll go back there and go with just my husband one day, perhaps if with some friends, and we'll buy it out. That would be on my list. So
Yeah, it's a spectacular place. It's the only private in-holding in Denali National Park. I mean, literally, and that's because the father of the current generation of Sheldons who own it was a bush pilot who used to bring people to climb Denali. And he would fly them up by ski plane to climb Denali. He built a small cabin there, not very near to the chalet, and then the next generation that is currently owns and manages it built this beautiful chalet. You are literally in the middle of nowhere, only accessible by helicopter. In terms of dark sky, it doesn't get any darker. So for northern lights, stargazing, and then winter activities, even during the summer. I mean, so that the activities, since it's surrounded by snowfields and ice fields, the activities during the summer are also the same as winter with cross country skiing, snowshoeing, etc. So it's an unusual place, but if it's worthwhile for both winter and summer. Now, the northern lights are predominantly in the January to March timeframe, although September, October, November, December is also possible.
Awesome. Well, I think, it's a great bucket list item for when you win the lottery or decide you want to splurge.
Well, or go with 5 couples. I mean, that's the best of all worlds, because then it's not cheap, but it's not outrageously expensive if you share it with 5 others.
Yeah.
So we've had some buyouts for just a family of 4, but that's expensive per person.
It makes up the per person price a little bit.
Right.
Well, I'll put a link to all these different places in the highlights after I post this video later, so people can go and look at the gorgeous pictures and dream about traveling. I know we're all looking forward to, obviously, the world being a little more open in the future. I picked Alaska for my destination next summer because it is US based. So that seemed to be a good, strategy as far as a risk assessment goes of having to hopefully not cancel the trip. And I think for, other people who are considering Alaska, it's a good time to go. Next week, we're actually going to talk a bit about out west and glamping, which is also something that's super fun and adventurous to do in the summer. So even though we're surrounded by snow here in New Hampshire, we are going to keep thinking about summer travel so we could keep dreaming and hoping that we get there one day. And I wanted to say thank you so much, Marty, for today. This has been so fun. I love learning about Alaska. I love looking at these gorgeous pictures. Hopefully I'll be able to take a few good ones too when I'm there myself. And I look forward to, working with you in the months ahead when we have some clients heading up your way.
Well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to working with you and those of your clients that are looking for something wonderful to do and probably not coming all the way back.
The risk of maybe never coming home is there. You got to remember that. Happened
to me, but
right. It happens to the best of us, right? All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yep.